Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Monday, May 20th. What the hell? I had trouble figuring out what month it was suddenly. May 20th. I really wanted it to be January 20th. But maybe I wanted it to be January 20th, 2025, and be inaugurating Joe Biden for a second term. Fast forward, please. I'd like to skip this election season. It is Monday, May 20th, 2024. Time for another election, but not quite yet. We are without Greg Dworkin this morning, who will be back on Wednesday. No emergency or anything, just one of those days, which means, of course, that if there was news, I don't know about it, and you won't know about it either. I'll have to make my own survey of the news, although actually we always have the abbreviated pundit roundup to lean on, and we can do that. And there was plenty of news as it happens anyway, so we're not going to be short of items to talk about. It's just that I don't know. Should I do the first hour silent or the second hour? No, I'll do both. Okay. Well, this gives us an opportunity to catch up on a couple of things that happened over the weekend, a couple of things that didn't get time last week, a couple of things that developed late this weekend, a couple of things that are world historical serious but aren't necessarily top of the front page news here in the United States. I guess beginning with the fact that Iran's president and foreign minister have both been killed in a helicopter crash. I mean, I guess that's like what a serious worldwide news survey begins with. It's not I don't know what to say about it. It appears to have generated an awful lot of conspiracy chatter on Twitter over the weekend. Blue Sky mostly had it right, I guess, saying, there was a helicopter crash, and helicopters, they sometimes crash, especially if you are trying, as they were trying to do, to fly them through the mountains in the fog, which just sounds like two bad ideas at once. Of course, another bad idea is putting your president and foreign minister on the same helicopter. But what can you do? The Iranians apparently don't have a great deal of options. Apparently a very old helicopter. Has not been easy for them to procure new ones or maintain old ones, as they are mostly under all sorts of economic embargoes. So I guess that's all the conspiracy you need. But the idea that there was some sort of conspiracy about knocking it out of the sky, apparently mostly groundless, I guess, or entirely groundless. And also, you should remember that Iran doesn't actually lean on their president and foreign minister to actually run the country. They have a supreme religious leader who does all of that. I'm sure they would rather not be without a president and foreign minister, but there you have it. It hasn't decapitated the country, but it does come at a rather tense time, to say the least, as they are involved in machinations around the region and around the world. The New York Times reporting on this, let's see, is there any latest update? The latest update just now, as a matter of fact, I guess, word from Iranian state media that the president, who is Ebrahim Raisi, and the Iranian foreign minister, who apparently doesn't merit mention in the subheader, but I'm sure will show up in the body of the reporting, was also killed in the crash. They are, of course, influential figures, if not those who actually run policy for the country. Foreign minister, I don't know why I even asked for this. Okay, go ahead and try and pronounce the foreign minister's name. Let's see. Hossein Amir Abdollahian. Abdollahian? Okay, maybe. I don't know. I haven't dealt with the foreign ministry of Iran in over, doesn't matter what number you put on it, number of years. I've never dealt with them, so. All right, well, apparently a technical failure in the helicopter resulting in the crash. That's about the extent of the analysis available that will be of interest, unless you wanted to know that it was a Bell 212 helicopter that went down in a mountainous area on Sunday. Let's see, near the city of Jolfa, if you are keeping track or have a map or know anything about Iranian geography. Some pictures of the mountainous region and the crash site depict a rough terrain indeed. It would be difficult to fly a helicopter over these mountains in good conditions, it looks like to me. But, all right. This would be, by the way, geographically speaking, the far northwest of Iranian territory on the border or near the border with, let's see, Azerbaijan is clearly identified on this map. And then, of course, for all of you who are familiar with maps, all the other cool places that are adjacent to northwestern Iran, which will be available just as soon as I look them up by zooming in the map. Azerbaijan will be neighbored by Armenia. Armenia has a short border with Iran in that area. And also, I have to scoot over here. Is this Turkey? Yes. So, Turkey borders Iran in that region, Armenia and Azerbaijan. Iran has lots of borders. But, okay, well, I don't know what to tell you about the rest of the situation here. It's being updated. It merits a live update situation on the New York Times website. So we'll see if there is more to be discovered. There is, let's see. If you zoom down here and scroll down a little bit, it does say Israel should expect little change from Raisi's replacement, experts say. That seems likely, given, again, the structure of the Iranian government. And they're a little resistant to change, particularly on the Israel front. So, okay, there you have it. He was, in fact, I guess, on his way to or back from meeting with the president of Azerbaijan, which explains the proximity. Okay. Well, I don't have that much to add on that front other than the fact that it is serious news and we ought to be paying attention to it and see whether there's any fallout. But it looks like the experts say there won't be any discernible change for the casual observer and no likely change policy-wise with respect to Israel. Should never expect that, I think. Okay, let's see. Other items for consideration from over the weekend. Let's see, what's the most exciting development? How about this one? Rudy Giuliani stepped on another rake over the weekend, and it was exciting and fun. Apparently, it was his 80th birthday party. I don't know when the birthday actually falls in. And really, who could care less about that? I don't think it's possible. Anyway, he was having an 80th birthday party and celebrating it in Palm Beach, Florida area, I guess, hanging around Pervalago as usual. And apparently, Arizona has been looking for him in order to indict him in their broader election interference case, particularly that against the fake electors. And it's about time that all these states really came crashing down on the fake electors and everybody who had anything to do with it. And as it turns out, he was aware of the fact that they were trying to serve him with notice, serve him with a subpoena, I guess, or give him his indictment, his notice of the indictment. And he's been avoiding them for some time and trying to, A, stay, I guess, out of Arizona, but B, out of their sight. And because he's Rudy Giuliani and an idiot and he loves to buy rakes and place them wrong side up on the ground around his house, he's been taunting them on social media that they can't find them. And apparently on the day that he was served, do they have the tweet embedded here? They really should. It made the rounds on social media. But basically, he was taunting them, saying, if they can't find me by tomorrow, there it is. If Arizona authorities can't find me by tomorrow morning, 1, they must dismiss the indictment, and 2, they must concede they can't count votes. That was just an extra shot at them, I guess. Meanwhile, I guess it became known in Giuliani circles that he was having a big birthday bash, an 80th birthday bash in Florida. And so they showed up. And apparently, according to at least one message I saw here on Blue Sky, yeah, here we are. We'll see, is it Who's reporting this one? Oh, I don't know. I think this goes to somebody's blog. But this, the allegation is they showed up right after his birthday party and served him with this subpoena, I guess. I'll read the story. At any rate, apparently whoever was doing the process serving joined in the chorus of happy birthday and then handed him the paperwork. So that's pretty funny. And of course, the idea that he would taunt the authorities and then be caught immediately seems pretty fitting for Giuliani. Here's the story in the New York Times. Who's reporting here? Anna Betts. Giuliani is formally notified of his indictment in the Arizona election case. After trying to reach him for weeks, officials served him the notice as he left his 80th birthday party. He is expected to appear in court on Tuesday. That's tomorrow. Excellent. So catching a flight to Arizona, and it's a little tight for cash. He should probably go Greyhound if he can, but he still loves to live the high life despite the fact that he's declared bankruptcy. Rudy Giuliani, Rudolph W. Giuliani, in the New York Times, of course, was served with a notice of his indictment. Tell me, what's the paperwork titled here? They haven't said so far. Served with a notice of his indictment in the Arizona election interference case on Friday night. So it's too late for our show, but perfect for Monday morning. Becoming the last of the 18 defendants to receive the notice after nearly a month of unsuccessful attempts by the authorities. The indictment, have they thought about setting out Wile E. Coyote-style traps for him? And by the way, they could bait them with, I don't know, young women. That would probably work. Seems to be no fail with him. Anyway, the indictment against Giuliani, Donald J. Trump's former personal lawyer, and others includes conspiracy, fraud, and forgery charges related to their attempts to change the results of the 2020 election in the state in favor of Mr. Trump, according to prosecutors. Again, I can't emphasize enough how clownish and ridiculous the idea of forging false electoral college certificates really is. It's just amazing the I don't know the depths to which they went and the blatant attempts to just completely hack the system. Well, if there's paper that says I won, then I won. No, you're actually supposed to win more votes. The paper is supposed to be indicative of the actual results. What? What are you talking about? This paper says the same thing. Okay, well, anyway, among the other defendants are Mark Meadows. You know him, former White House chief of staff, along with all of the fake electors who acted on Trump's behalf to keep him in power despite his defeat there. Richie Taylor, a spokesman for Chris Mays, and do we decide on this, Mays or Mayes? Mays, the attorney general in Arizona, who brought the indictment, said that Giuliani was served on Friday night around 11 p.m., way past his bedtime, in Palm Beach County, Florida, as he left his 80th birthday party. The agents by no means disrupted his event. They waited to serve him outside as he left. Mr. Taylor said, how nice. Very considerate of them. I knew that it was going to be one of their complaints. How rude. They served me during my birthday party. Nope. They waited until after your cake. Mr. Giuliani's spokesman, Ted Goodman, who's not a particularly good man, I guess, confirmed in a statement on Saturday that Giuliani was served after the party, after the guests had left, and he was walking to the car. Initial reports were that some who witnessed the service broke out into tears. Boo-hoo. Our Rudy is being indicted. He was, now this is the brave face that they put on through the spokesman, he was unfazed and enjoyed an incredible evening with hundreds of people from all walks of life. I'm certain they were from all walks of life, who love and respect him for his contributions to society. Mr. Goodman said, we look forward to full vindication soon. Or death, whichever comes first. Mr. Giuliani is expected to appear in court on Tuesday unless the court grants a delay. Oh, boy. A trial in the Arizona election interference case has been tentatively set to start in mid-October. So I guess that means today will be spent trying to produce that delay for Giuliani to appear. Over the past several weeks, Mr. Taylor said that authorities had tried multiple times to serve Mr. Giuliani in New York City, as well as through a phone call and certified mail. Mr. Taylor said that agents with Ms. May's office traveled to Florida on Friday knowing that Mr. Giuliani was there because of live streams from his residence there. which, by the way, he should be surrendering and putting up for sale in order to satisfy part of the many judgments against him and his bankruptcy creditors. But I'm bankrupt, but I'm having a big birthday bash at a $3 million condo in Florida and flying around New York to Florida, et cetera, but so bankrupt. Anyway, we would have preferred, they say, to serve him 3 weeks ago when everyone else was served, adding that Mr. Giuliani had avoided the attempts and had been taunting the office online. Great idea. The party was organized by Caroline Wren. Remember her? I think Greg has mentioned her in the past. A Republican consultant. And I think, is this the person who bounced back and forth between DeSantis camp and the Trump camp? I can't remember whether that's the case or not. But Greg can tell us on Wednesday. Several hours before it began, the party, I guess, Giuliani posted on Twitter a now deleted photo of himself with a group of people, captioned, as we read before, if Arizona authorities can't find me by tomorrow morning, they must dismiss the indictment, and then, extra barb, they must concede they can't count votes. Mr. Taylor said that though the initial scheduled court appearance was approaching, there was no deadline to serve the notice. So, I don't know, maybe that's true in New York, or maybe it's true nowhere, and he was just making it up. Couldn't tell you. The defendants are accused by prosecutors of putting pressure on officials responsible for certifying election results to encourage them to change the election results. Among them, the governor, members of the state legislature, and the Board of Supervisors in Maricopa, the state's most populous county. And that really puts it as plainly as possible, in addition to just the ridiculousness of trying to forge electoral college certificates. What it means at its heart, trying to do that and trying to get the governor to sign them, is that they're basically just leaning on Republican elected officials and saying, what if you just lied and told Congress and the news organizations and all of America that the vote results were something different, something other than the numbers that they were, and that a different person won the electoral college vote from Arizona? And and then the paperwork is actually kind of secondary to that. They forged that to try to back up the story. But I mean, it's just plain, everybody has heard from the news that Biden won Arizona. We counted the votes and Biden has more votes in Arizona. Well, let's just say the opposite and see if we can convince enough people to say, no, it's Arizona, or at a minimum for them to say, I don't know what's happening. It could be Biden. It could be Trump. We're just going to have to let Congress decide. But I mean, that's it. It's just that straight up bald-faced lie. We're just going to tell you that the results are something else and see what happens. If you believe it, awesome. If you don't believe it, but you're willing to say you don't know for sure what's happening, that's good too. Well, anyway, on Friday morning, John Eastman, another lawyer who advised Trump's 2020 election campaign, you know him, of course, became the first of the defendants to be arraigned in Arizona. He pleaded not guilty. Several other prominent defendants in the case are also scheduled to be arraigned next week. That's now this week, including Meadows, Boris Epshteyn, who remains one of Trump's top legal advisors, by the way. I guess that's it for this week. Giuliani and other former Trump allies also face similar charges in Georgia, as you know. Prosecutors in Michigan and Nevada have also brought criminal charges related to the Trump campaign's efforts to reverse the results of the 2020 election, but those cases have focused solely on the fake electors that the campaign deployed. Which is an interesting and different tactic, but this is why we let 1,000 flowers bloom among the states, right? Leave it to the states, as Republicans usually say. Last year, a jury ordered Giuliani to pay, by the way, $148 million. We discussed this last week, to two former Georgia election workers who said he had destroyed their reputations with lies, that they tried to steal the 2020 election from Trump. Several days later, a federal judge ordered Giuliani to immediately pay the sum he owes, citing concerns that he might conceal his assets if he were given more time. The next day, he filed for bankruptcy. And then a week or two after that, he decided to have a big 100-person birthday bash at the multi-million-dollar residence he maintains in Florida for no particular reason. But the court's going after that one. So perhaps they can wrest that from his hands, and he had one last birthday bash there before he loses control of it. We will see. All right, let's see. Other things I wanted to share with you over the weekend. Golly, there's a lot. So there's more information about Justice Alito. Of course, last week we were able to end with the story, I don't know where it appeared in the show, but we got the story out about his having how will we say it? Having had the American flag flying upside down, an inverted American flag flying from the flagpole outside of his residence in Alexandria or Arlington or Alexandria. I can't remember. Alexandria, I think. Anyway, and then of course, he hung it all on his wife. She did it. She did it because there was a neighbor nearby that had a insulting lawn sign about Trump. And so therefore something, and everyone knows the international sign for I don't like the sign on another neighbor's lawn nearby in this neighborhood, directly across the street from me or not, is to fly the flag of your country upside down. It is not. And of course, the problem was that at that time, the people who were most frequently spotted flying the flag upside down were the Stop the Steal protesters who had just recently sacked the Capitol. And several of the leaders of whom were just indicted, including Rudy Giuliani at his 80th birthday party. So there's that. He blamed it on his wife, said she did it. I had no idea. I have nothing to do with how the flag is flown at my residence, which is not ordinarily something that a ultra-conservative political figure he's a political figure. An ultra-conservative political figure will want to admit to. I have nothing to do with the flying of the flag. It should be I wake up early every day and personally raise the flag after, I don't know what, reading the Constitution to myself silently 25 times. But no, he has nothing to do with the flag. He denies it. He says it means something else. It's probably one of the worst explanations I've ever seen given for anything, but he's just trying to wiggle out of it. But everybody says, no, we know what it's about. Now, meanwhile, I did see someone here on Blue Sky, a well-followed Peter, who works as not a lawyer at Blue Sky, notes what looks to me like a screenshot from, say, New York Times, possibly. It looks like their typeface, Times New Roman. But there's no link. We could Google the contents, though, and maybe we'll do that and try and grab the article. But it reads here that Stephen Gillers, an expert in judicial ethics, it says in the story, at NYU Law School, disagreed. Disagreed with what? Disagreed with the notion that there was something terribly, terribly wrong or something discernible from the message of flying the flag upside down, and that it is Alito's fault. But he disagreed, noting that the test in the recusal statute, that is, if you were going to try and force him to recuse himself from decisions bearing, say, on January 6th or presidential immunity or any of those related claims, the recusal statute, which doesn't even apply to them anyway, is based on the perspective of a fair-minded person who has all the facts. No one ever has all the facts. But he goes on to say, I don't think that such an objective observer would question Alito's impartiality based on this incident. Really? I find it impossible, he says, to believe that Alito knew the flag was flying upside down. Now, how is it impossible to believe that? You could observe that with your own eyes. But it's impossible to believe that he knew the flag was flying upside down, or if he did know, that he knew the relationship to stop the steal. I don't believe that he would have allowed this to happen otherwise. That is interesting. Now he goes on to say, Gillers added that while Alito's explanation for how it happened is hard to believe, it is more credible than the view that he knowingly chose to fly the flag upside down, knowing its political message, which is an incredible statement, really. And I don't know. That seems to me like maybe, you need a refresher in like modern political practice to be a judicial ethics expert and say this. He's basically saying, as I said over the weekend, and apparently lots of people agreed, what it comes down to, this argument boils down to, well, it can't be that there was this flagrant violation of judicial ethics, flying the flag upside down to join the Stop the Steal movement at this particular moment in time, and that it's his fault, or that he even knew about it, or that if he didn't, or that if he knew about it, he didn't understand its meaning. But it can't be that there's this flagrant violation of judicial ethics, because if that were the case, well, that would be a flagrant violation of judicial ethics. And what would we do then? And the answer is, since there's nothing we can do about it, I mean, you see the circularity of this logic, right? There's nothing we can do about it because the Supreme Court is the supreme arbiter of all these things, including their judicial ethics rules, and whether or not they need to recuse themselves. And he'll just say, no, I don't. And there's nothing that's out there that you can use to get rid of them except impeachment, which seems a little unlikely at this or any other time. But it can't be that this is the flagrant violation of judicial ethics that it looks like, because if that were the case, then we'd have to do something about it. And since we can't do anything about it, it must not be, or we'd better hope that it isn't this flagrant violation of judicial ethics, because then everything that I work for, everything that I study, everything that I represent myself as an expert in is all upside down BS and never existed, and my entire career is a sham. So, I mean, I understand the impulse, certainly, but I don't know I don't know if I can give you a passing grade on the logic. It's can't be that he did this, because if he did this, then he would have done that. And that would be bad, and we would have to do something about the fact that he did that, but we can't do that, because that would be, I don't know, horrific and upsetting. And so therefore, it's better for us to say he didn't know what the hell was going on, despite the fact that he's supposed to be a pretty smart guy.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So, there is another direction that I should head now with respect to Alito, but I need to pause in order to make this observation, or else I will forget it. But as I was reading over once again, the logic of Stephen Gillers, is it Gillers or I don't know, G sound, Gillers, it looks like Gillers to me. It has to be Gillers, because if it was Gillers, that would be an enormous mistake. And if I made an enormous mistake, I would have to correct that enormous mistake. And I haven't corrected it, so therefore I could never have made that mistake. Stephen Gillers, while I was observing and ruminating on that logic, it actually struck a note, I don't know, discordant note, and brought me over to the Israel situation, which is, complicated and annoying in many ways. And as a matter of fact, the headline of Greg's abbreviated pundit roundup today is All Eyes on Israel's Internal Infighting. And I would suggest, well, there are probably some other eyes elsewhere. That's true. But the internal infighting, we discussed it a little bit last week about the weirdness of the and improbability, based on recent Israeli political history, apparently, improbability of this ultra right-wing coalition that they've put together. In other words, it wasn't that many years ago that even even the odious Benjamin Netanyahu refused to share a stage or to acknowledge the presence in the same room as him of those who are in his coalition now. Itamar Ben-Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich, two ultra-right-wing party leaders that, you had to put distance between yourself and them in the past, and you still should, but he doesn't any longer. And so it was highly improbable, but it did come together that way. And the impossibility, given that you're either surrendering your control of the government and therefore, of course, subjecting yourself to prosecution on the pending corruption charges, not to mention whatever else might cascade out of that now, given other developments in the news these days, which lest I leave them aside, I'll just spit them out here. But both Netanyahu and, where did I put this story? Why is this not immediately on the front page here? Netanyahu and the leadership of Hamas, but also other leaders of the Israeli government, including Defense Minister Gallant, are both now targeted by the International Court of Justice and are said to be, it's now said to be pending that they will be indicted for crimes against humanity. And, wow, you really have to maybe want to make more prominent mention of that, except that for some reason it wasn't sitting top of pocket. It's one of those things, as I mentioned, is having some weird functionality issues depending on where you click save in pocket from, what app you're in. It either ignores you or doesn't. Here we are. Well, let's take the CNN report of it, exclusive, except clearly it's available in other outlets at this point. ICC seeks arrest warrants against Netanyahu and also what's the first name of the Gaza's Hamas leader? Yahya, is that really right? Yahya, Yahya Sinwar. I don't deal all that closely with the leadership of Hamas, so but they've been curiously, I guess, unmentioned lately, other than just sort of a passing reference to the organization Hamas. Anyway, International Criminal Court seeking arrest warrants for Yahya Sinwar and Netanyahu, but also a couple of other top leaders, including Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant and other top Hamas leaders, including, what am I doing to myself, trying to pronounce these things, Mohammed Diab Ebrahim al-Masri, the leader of the Al-Qassem Brigades, better known as Mohammed Deif, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, D-E-I-F, Deif, and Ismail Haniyeh, Hamas's political leader. So, lots of threats circulating. Anyway, I was saying, though, I was really going to talk about the difficulty of trying to resolve anything about what's happening in Gaza. The big focus of last week's discussion was the lack of a follow-up plan. What are we going to do about governing Gaza if the Israelis do succeed, let's say, in wiping out Hamas, which, legitimate or not, was providing the nearest thing to governance for Gaza that they had going for it. They could theoretically allow the Palestinian Authority, dominated by the Fatah faction that runs the government functions, I guess, of the West Bank, to do that, but they may be a little bit wary of that until they're certain that Hamas is wiped out, given that their top echelon of officials in Gaza were all murdered by Hamas when they won election, in the one and only time they ever let the populace vote on the subject. Anyway, or will it be annexed to Israel as the ultra-right prefers? It doesn't seem like that's a viable option in the face of what the rest of the world thinks. But it's if you say, well, no, we're going to rule out the annexation and, further occupation of Gaza and put yourself in agreement with most of the rest of the world, then the government collapses, which, the rest of the world says, well, so what? Get a new government, right? This happens all the time in parliamentary democracies. Go for it. Get a new government together. It's not entirely clear that they could put one together very quickly, but I don't know. And I guess in the face of what people are charging the Israeli government with now, with respect to their activities in Gaza and the West Bank, that's really not a huge concern. I mean, on balance, well, you're going to have difficulty putting together a coalition government. Oh, no. Who cares compared to what else is going on? But it's not a good time to be without government. That's true. But what are you going to do? Sometimes that happens. But from inside, where you literally have some control over these things and can pull the levers to influence events in your favor, you're probably not going to pull that lever. You're just going to say, well, the other and untenable situation is this ridiculous coalition remains together, and I keep it together by saying ridiculous things like, sure, we'll annex Gaza and settle it with Israeli settlers. Can that happen? It certainly can. By force of arms, you could try and make it happen. Is it wise? Do I believe that certainly some members of the coalition believe it's wise, but they believe it's wise in the sense that they think they can make it work because, I don't know, God will intervene and he'll make it happen. Well, I don't know if that's a great bet on a number of levels. For non-believers, of course, they will say, well, God isn't really there to help with that. He's just not there at all. And, of course, believers might say, there is a God, and there's no way God is going along with this. Or you could also say, there's a God, and he actually would like you to face charges in front of the International Criminal Court rather than say, So, there's a lot of holes in the story of, well, God will help us do it. But the alternative is, I'll be reality-based and say no to the God plan. I could try the military plan, or I could surrender to the International Criminal Court and face crimes against humanity charges. Or maybe now this is an interesting play. You could say, well, what about if I faced the charges with perhaps less danger attached to it and just face corruption charges in Israel? I don't know what you would consider I don't think they're going to execute you anymore at the International Criminal Court. And maybe you would face more years in prison with them for crimes against humanity than for corruption in Israel. Although, I don't know. It's a good question. Anyway, is the infighting in Israel stopping anything normal from happening? Yes, that seems to be the case. So I was just sort of thinking about that. That was reminded of it by the Giuliani story, or rather the Stephen Giller's story about not being able, essentially, to believe that Alito had done this egregious thing in total flagrant violation of judicial ethics. Because if that were the case, someone would have to do something about it. It could not, this sort of flagrant violation cannot stand. And since it is standing, for one thing, it must likely not have happened. But at the very least, it's impossible for someone who believes in the institutions, and in particular this Supreme Court institution, it's just impossible to believe that a justice would do that because, of course, they respect the institution just the way I do. There's really no guarantee of that at all. But it seems like the same sort of logic that's going on here. Of course, we are going to you need to have a plan for Gaza after the war is over. I don't have one, but I've got to eventually. So the only thing to do is to continue fighting the war so that we don't arrive at the place where you discover that I still don't have such a plan. And yes, the only way for me to be able to continue to do that is to have the untenable position that I will actually pursue the lunatic policies of my ultra-right wing government coalition, despite the fact that it's impossible, stupid, and in flagrant violation of not only, I presume, international law, but probably runs counter to even public opinion in Israel, which, by the way, we are reminded, is still pretty pro-war, or at least certainly anti-Gaza. And yet, I don't know that there's any stomach for the settlement of Gaza, but he has to run around pretending that it is, because there is such a sentiment. Because if there weren't, then his coalition wouldn't make any sense. And if his coalition didn't make any sense, there would be, the government would fall. And if the government fell, he'd be out as prime minister. And if he was out as prime minister, he'd be facing charges of corruption in Israeli courts. So that can't be right either. So we're definitely not doing that. And, but in reality, the logic is, Alito did know about the flag, and it is a flagrant violation of judicial ethics, and he should be impeached from office, even if you don't have the votes to remove him. But that's, I don't know, that's destabilizing and scary, so we'll say it didn't happen. And it sort of strikes me as the Israeli situation. So, with that on the table, let's jump back to the Alito situation directly and give you this information from Chris Geidner, writing at his, I always wonder whether when you name your Substack something like this, it's really funny at the time, and then you realize, oh, I'm being cited by authorities and I have to be cited as law dork. Well, it's of your own making. Unless, like me, it's of Armando's making, calling the show Kagro in the morning. I mean, it makes a certain amount of sense about the morning part, but I'm stuck saying, oh yeah, so it's Kagro in the morning. Really? What's Kagro? It's nothing. It's a fake name. I don't know. All right. Well, so Law Dork, okay. It's all right with me. But here's the Law Dork exclusive. And this is, I guess, some good original reporting here. I mean, he does a lot of original reporting on the events on the ground and what's happening inside the court. But this is like investigative reporting. Very interesting. Justice Alito, it says here in the headline, sold Bud Light stock, which I assume means Anheuser-Busch stock. There's no Bud Light stock, but you know what I mean. Why call it Bud Light stock? Because he sold it amidst the anti-trans boycott effort. Alito, it says in the subheader here, did not respond to questions about the sale, but its timing raises fair questions, particularly in light of other recent ethical questions. And there's put together a little graphical collage here to try to explain all of this, including let's see, some headlines from the time. Bud Light distributors no longer expect sales to recover from Dylan Mulvaney disaster is one headline. Then there's the headline of why woke capitalism works for Ben and Jerry's. Politics, it says, this looks like the Wall Street Journal, is central to its mission, but a distraction from Anheuser-Busch's, Disney's, and BlackRock's business models. And then superimposed over, one, a picture of Samuel Alito, and two, the financial disclosure reports that he has filed at 4:37 p.m. on Sunday, August 13th, 2023. Far-right anti-LGBTQ influencer Hiatus, who I frequently compare to other Israeli figures, just to make another connection, that's libs of TikTok to most of us, posted a pre-transition photograph of transgender influencer Dylan Mulvaney, calling her, quote, a dude on Twitter. The post came months into a manufactured anti-transgender controversy over Mulvaney's minor participation in a Bud Light March Madness campaign. Can you say March Madness? Do we have to pay anybody for that one? Which led to a boycott of the beer and its maker, Anheuser-Busch, more broadly. By mid-May, do you remember this? I do. By mid-May, the Wall Street Journal reported on how the boycott was leading to a downswing in Bud Light sales and upswings in sales of both Miller Lite and Coors Light, both made by Molson Coors. But by the way, it also meant that the most popular beer in America suddenly became Modelo Negro, which is amazing. And yes, a Mexican beer was the most popular beer in America all of a sudden, and there was a whole demographic story wrapped up in that. But that's neither here nor there. Well, it is. It is. But it's there, not here, in terms of the focus of this story. Raichik's post followed stories at the end of July and the beginning of August, detailing the negative effects of the boycott on the beer's brand and sales. As of this weekend, the post had more than 8 million views per Twitter's data, most of which were likely amassed in the days after it was posted last summer. As with most of what Raichik does, the post was intended to inflame the passions of anti-trans people online, and it worked, although it also prompted responses from Mulvaney's supporters as well. By the next morning, Ari Drennan, the LGBTQ program director at Media Matters, posted a video of Mulvaney with a supportive note. Drennan's post is excerpted here. I just do not understand the hate against Dylan Mulvaney. I think I've ever never maybe seen somebody who gives off more positive energy the entire time I've been online. Okay. Well, it goes on, Chris does, to say later that day, something happened more quietly as well. According to a periodic transaction report posted but now unavailable in the Federal Judicial Financial Disclosure Reports database. Why unavailable? Don't know. Justice Sam Alito sold at least some, anyway, of his stock in Anheuser-Busch and bought stock in Molson Coors on Monday, August 14th, 2023. It's interesting that he wouldn't go all in and say, to hell with it, sell all my Anheuser-Busch and put it all in Molson Coors, but whatever. And I would say the fact that he didn't sell it all maybe mitigates this. And, that doesn't seem like a boycott, does it? But the fact that it was sold and converted into Molson Coors stock does tend to argue that this was some sort of an action related to the boycott. I could have bought anything, and hey, it's not his fault if he likes beer. Or maybe he just thought beer stock was going to go up given Brett Kavanaugh's new paycheck or whatever. But, it is a little bit even more suspicious. Alito did not respond to a request for comment about the sale and purchase or whether it was related to the boycott. The coverage of the purported effects of the boycott on Anheuser-Busch sales or Raichik's post. Alito would not even provide a confirmation of the accuracy of the previously posted periodic transaction report. According to Fix the Courts, Gabe Roth. Hi, Gabe. It's all of a sudden arrived. I didn't even schedule this interview, but according to Fix the Courts, Gabe Roth, who downloaded the report, so you know it exists, it was one of a handful of new reports available this past week on the database, and he had no reason to doubt their veracity. Veracity is a term that puts me in mind of my cousin Vinny again. We could check their veracity. Anyway, I forget the line now. Alito's behavior is similar, both in timing and in substance, to other boycott-related activity and coverage. I wonder if he sold stock in Keurig. We should check that out. Anyway, whether Alito is participating in the boycott matters, moreover, in case you didn't know. He's going to include it all in one article. We're not going to have to wait for a Why It Matters piece from Vox or anyone else. Who gave us that one? Oh, that was Steve Bannon. Oh, okay. Anyway, whether Alito was participating in the boycott does matter. For one of the several reasons it matters why there was an upside-down flag flying at his house on January 17th, 2021, as the New York Times reported earlier this week, and what he knew about that. Same reason. The answer to both sets of questions says something about whether his participation in related cases is ethical. Steve Giller says yes. I say no. I disagree. As Alito agreed to when the justices announced their code of conduct, a justice should not engage in other political activity. But that happened before. So, you can't charge me with an ex post facto. You can, though. As the New York Times explained in their report about the inverted flag, and by the way, it's now a live controversy again now that he's issuing denials that don't make any sense. But as the New York Times reported about the flag, which was being used at the time by those who had tried to overturn the election and were decrying the fact that Joe Biden would be taking office on January 20th, 2021, judicial ethics codes stress the need for judges to remain independent and avoid political statements or opinions on matters that could come before them, which is something that judges and justices have known since, well, we'll say since time immemorial, but it's not really that long. But they have known all along, and it certainly has been the case throughout Justice Alito's lifetime, let alone political career. You are supposed to avoid this appearance of impropriety. That's just true in all public life. Participating in a boycott is undeniably a political statement, and there are pending cases for which participation in an anti-trans beer boycott could be seen as his having a finger on the scale of justice on the side of anti-trans advocates, supporting and in some cases defending these laws such that recusal could be required. Under federal law, Alito is directed to recuse himself from cases in which his impartiality might reasonably be questioned. Another provision directs recusal where a judge has a personal bias or prejudice concerning a party in a case. Alito's stock switch came a month after the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Sixth Circuit became the first appeals court in the nation to allow a ban on gender-affirming care for minors to go into effect. Although an early ruling in a case out of Tennessee, the order made it clear that laws restricting transgender people's freedoms would likely be reaching the High Court sooner rather than later, and they did, after the Sixth Circuit ruled on September 28th, 2023, that the Tennessee and Kentucky bans are likely constitutional. The challengers of both laws, as well as the Biden administration, soon thereafter urged the Supreme Court to take up appeals of that decision. On May 16th, the justices considered for the first time whether to grant those petitions and hear one or more of the appeals in the fall, cases in which the justices are being asked to decide, among other questions, whether the bans on gender-affirming care for minors violate the constitutional guarantee of equal protection. It is not yet clear whether Alito will be participating in the cases, but he did not recuse himself from participating in the April shadow docket ruling that allowed Idaho to enforce its ban on gender-affirming care for minors during the state's appeal below. We also know that Alito has a narrow view of these ethical constraints, given his refusal in September of 2023 to recuse himself from a key tax case still pending before the justices, in which he had a relationship with a law firm partner representing one of the parties in the case. In short, there is no reason to believe that Alito would recuse himself from the consideration of the Tennessee and Kentucky cases. The court could announce as soon as Monday, that's today, what it will be doing with these cases. I guess we'll have an eye out for that. Let me know if you see anything about that, and we ought to announce it during the course of the show. I guess there's a bit more about this as well. Okay, good. It's an interesting topic. Where did we leave off? Raychick's August 13th, 2023 post was just another flashpoint, even from her, in the hate-filled attack on Mulvaney and Anheuser-Busch. The whole thing began, if you need the background on it, when Mulvaney participated in a Bud Light March Madness promotional campaign in, of course, March of 2023. As then reported, Anheuser-Busch later released a special line of Pride-themed cans with various pronouns, and in celebration of Mulvaney's one-year anniversary of transitioning, sent her a special can of Bud Light that included her face and a supportive message. After Mulvaney posted about that on April 1st, April Fool's Day, yes, April 1st, 2023, the backlash took off. It was, as the Wall Street Journal reported in May of 2023, not unusual, believe it or not, either in terms of the company partnering with influencers or in terms of it being pro-LGBTQ. Nonetheless, It led to attacks and a boycott effort from the anti-trans activists as well as anti-woke individuals like Travis Tritt, who on April 5th, 2023 posted on Twitter that he had, which got more than 24 million views as of this weekend. Here is that tweet. I will be deleting all Anheuser-Busch products from my tour hospitality rider. I know many other artists who are doing the same because it's super important to disrupt your own stupid life because another person that you don't like very much got a hold of one of these beers. As time went on, the New York Post and Wall Street Journal, among other, even more ideological publications, were dragging Anheuser-Busch for its handling of the backlash as well as the claimed effects, often with sympathetic framing for the boycott itself. On August 1st, a New York Post headline declared, sales of Miller Lite, Coors Light crush Bud Light after Dylan Mulvaney fiasco. August 8th, the Wall Street Journal in its opinion pages, a space that Alito is known to favor, by the way, ran a column entitled Why Woke Capitalism Works for Ben & Jerry's that contained the subhead, Politics is Central to Its Mission, but a distraction from Anheuser-Busch's and also Disney and BlackRock's, who also were targets of criticism there. Anson Frericks, a former Anheuser-Busch executive whose Strive Asset Management, co-founded, by the way, with Vivek Ramaswamy, runs on the idea that the corporate world isn't worried enough about value to investors. Wrote in the column, by the way, that Bud Light's controversial partnership with transgender activist Dylan Mulvaney in April didn't create a future with more cheers, as Anheuser-Busch's mission states, or make Bud Light easy to enjoy, as the company declares. So they're going to like the dictionary definitions of their mission statements, which is about as dumb a stretch as you could possibly make with all this. All right. Well, I think you all know the background of it. I think it's more important that we noted for the record that Chris has done some good investigative work here, digging out these interesting moves in transferring assets from Anheuser-Busch to Molson Coors. Although apparently there's some purchase of another completely different product, I guess, or Sealed Air Corporation that makes bubble wrap. Sounds like actually a decent investment. I don't know if they're ideological or not, but anyway, an interesting development. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I think we've uncovered sufficiently what's going on here with Chris Geidner's piece. There's lots more detail, and he's really done a great job in establishing the importance of it. But he has me sold as it is. But just a great idea, and hopefully he's got some time to look into whether or not Alito participated in other boycotts along the way. The Keurig one comes to mind. Then, of course, there was, was it a reverse boycott of sorts? Wasn't there a point at which the alt-right, whoever, might speak on their behalf, had declared that New Balance sneakers were going to be part of the new, uniform of the alt-right, which was dismaying because I actually have some and I don't wear them around most times, but they look, as running shoes go, they were among the best, and I need those things, and my feet fall apart if exercising in other shoes. Just, there's only a couple of brands that can hold my feet together. So luckily that one never took off. But I guess you could look and see whether he made any investments in New Balance or sold off assets in Keurig, which I think is owned by a conglomerate that owns Dr. Pepper as well as Keurig. I don't really know how that came together. It's all beverage, so there's something to it, I guess. But you can follow along and find out whether he's made similar investments. And I guess the more you find investments, divestments, the more damning it all becomes. It certainly seems clear. At a minimum, the argument here is this guy lives in right-wing MAGA world, and it's problematic that he, like Justice Scalia in his day, just simply bought into right-wing memes and framing that you would only some of which you would only hear in the right-wing media sphere, like broccoli mandates You could, of course, hear about the Cornhusker kickback in wider circles than that, but broccoli mandates and various other things that from time to time the justices have tipped us off that they're getting their information from right-wing talk radio and similar circles rather than, the briefings or the oral arguments. And that's kind of important. Anyway, let's see. A couple other things to catch you up on. Here's word from Christine on 16. Just in, like literally. What's the timestamp? 2 minutes ago. Christine says here, good morning. If you're looking for a palate cleanser, sure, why not? Between the highly seasoned courses of the meal that is the New York Trump trial, here's a bit of New York City news about our local bureaucratic chatbot gone wild. Let's see. And it says KITM is making me giggle this morning, so I thought I'd return the favor with this item. Okay. I have seen this story, and we never really talked about it here. But let's see. Is this an older story? It goes back to early April 4th. But I do remember that this was the case. I don't think we ever mentioned it. The New York City has, for some unknown reason, there's really no reason at all for this to be happening except to be trendy, had put up its own AI chatbot, the city. The city government. And, no real reason for that. But, this is the AI craze has me thinking back to the days when companies that had no business doing so whatsoever would change their name or become a .com or something like it. I think also there was the hotness of adding interactive to your to the title of your company, and it would just raise your profile and your valuation instantly for no reason whatsoever. And we see that trend continue in like NFTs. There was no reason for that whatsoever, but what the hell? And briefly, there would be some value attached to that. Now, AI chatbots, or even claiming that you were using artificial intelligence, which these days, again, is mostly, well, we're going to add artificial intelligence to this thing. And, no, you're really not. You're just adding internet connectivity to it. And it's what you used to bill as it being a smart thing, appliance, door lock, spatula, what have you. It's smart because it can access the web. What can it do with that? Nothing. But, whatever, that makes it hot and you can charge more for it. And now people are on to the idea of the smart spatula. That's actually quite dumb. I don't need this. Spatula doesn't need to be smart. If I'm out of eggs, I'll get some eggs. The spatula can't get eggs. It can remind me to get eggs, but so can I remind myself to get eggs. Great reminder that we need eggs, looking in the refrigerator and finding no eggs. Right? Don't need to be connected to the internet for that. But people caught on to the smart thing, so now they don't buy into it anymore and they won't pay the premium. So now they'll tell you, I'm putting AI in your spatula. Oh, well, that's different. Because, technically that would be a different thing, except they're not putting any AI in it. It's just the same smart spatula. And now what? Anyway, New York City, I guess, thought it would be cool to have an AI chatbot, except, of course, just like most AI chatbots, it doesn't know anything and it will tell you the wrong information and not care. And in this case, it did do that. New York City's AI chatbot was, according to this report from early April from NBC in New York, caught telling businesses to break the law, which you would think would lead to the city taking it down, except it's Eric Adams, and so no. They're not taking it down, or at least they weren't back in April. At a press conference way back then, early April, Adams suggested that allowing users to find issues is just part of ironing out the kinks in new technology, provided they survive it. Like if you ask the city chatbot, is it okay to drink bleach and use hydroxychloroquine? If it told you yes, could we work out the kinks later? You could. But the damage may already have been done. And in this case, an artificial intelligence-powered chatbot created by New York City. And again, it's not created at all by New York City. They plugged in an app and said, if you come to mycity.com or whatever the website is, and you ask it a question, it will access some chatbot that exists somewhere else as a third-party product, but answer you here on this screen, so you will think that there's a city chatbot. Anyway, it was created by New York City allegedly to help small business owners for some reason. I mean, you always want to help small business owners, but why is it not to help, I don't know, people who are having difficulty getting the garbage collected? Maybe that could be a complaint from small business owners. Anyway, it's under criticism, or was, still is probably, for dispensing bizarre advice that misstates local policies and advises companies to violate the law. But days after the issues were first reported by tech news outlet The Markup, the city has, or at least at that point had, opted to leave the tool on its official government website. Mayor Eric Adams defended the decision this week, even as he acknowledged the chatbot's answers were wrong in some areas, like mostly every area. Launched in October as a one-stop shop for business owners, the chatbot offers users algorithmically generated text responses to questions about navigating the city's bureaucratic maze, which would be a good application for any kind of help you could get. It should just be, verifiably true. It includes a disclaimer, though, so there you go, that it may occasionally produce incorrect, harmful, or biased information. And the caveat, since strengthened, that change it did make, that its answers are not legal advice, and it should always say that. It continues to dole out false guidance, troubling experts who say the buggy system highlights the dangers of governments embracing AI-powered systems without sufficient guardrails. They're rolling out software that's unproven, without oversight, said Julia Stoyanovich, a computer science professor and director of the Center for Responsible AI at NYU. NYU is having a big day today. It's clear they have no intention of doing what's responsible. The good stuff is down here, I think. In responses to questions posed way back when, the chatbot falsely suggested it is legal for an employer to fire a worker who complains about sexual harassment, or who doesn't disclose a pregnancy, or refuses to cut their dreadlocks. Actually, the opposite of the true answers, of course. Contradicting two of the city's signature waste initiatives, it claimed that businesses can put their trash, I knew this would come out, trash be a part of this. You can put your trash in black garbage bags, and you're not required to compost. Don't worry about it. Apparently, not the case. At times, the bot's answers veered into the absurd. Oh, here, finally, some absurdity. If asked if a restaurant could serve cheese nibbled on by a rodent, it responded, yes, you can still serve cheese to customers if it has rat bites. Before adding that it was important to assess the extent of the damage caused by the rat and to inform customers about the situation. Of course. A spokesperson for Microsoft, which powers the bot through its Azure AI services, which means no, New York City didn't create a chatbot. The company said it was working with city employees to improve the service. Oh, good. And ensure that the outputs are accurate and grounded on the city's official documentation, which is supposed to be the point of these things. At a press conference on Tuesday, Adams suggested that allowing users to find issues is just part of ironing out the kinks in this new technology. Anyone knows that technology knows, anyone that knows technology knows. This is how it's done. I don't think so. Only those who are fearful sit down and say, oh, it's not working the way we want. Now we have to run away from it altogether. I don't live that way. Stoyanovich called that approach reckless and irresponsible. You get the idea? All right. Well, that is pretty amazing. And it's just indicative of a larger trend of just slapping whatever crap you want on there and just say it's AI, and whether it's AI or not, doesn't really matter. Or, somebody else has an AI chatbot that's genuinely AI, fine. Plug it into this and say, we developed it. And then when it gives you a crappy answer, you say, it's Microsoft's fault. All right. Well, anyway, that was a hell of a story. I loved the answers. And then, of course, for a while, it became trendy for the reporters to show just how ridiculous this was by asking obviously leading and stupid questions. Is it okay for me to murder the mayor of New York City? Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Well, no, it isn't. That's absurdity and all. But then, of course, people got the message eventually that, by the way, every time you do one of these things to prove how dumb AI is, you burn like 1 billion gallons of water or whatever. There's a crazy amount of electricity is used, a crazy amount of heat is produced. It's very wasteful. So I don't even recommend screwing around with these things. just because, especially if you know it's going to give you a stupid wrong answer. Why waste the resources? But it is a funny story. Someone else has done it for you, so you don't have to. So you've got that going for you, which is nice. All right. Other items for discussion. We'll move on from now. And thanks, Christine, for the suggestion. And we'll see if we can't work in a couple of other items from Pocket here. Let's see. Also over the weekend, more graduation speeches. No more word from any place kickers that I'm aware of, in case you want to keep up on what various NFL special teamers are thinking this weekend. But there is news from the graduation scene that down at, look at this. This has gotten me a totally different story. How interesting. This has led me to the Washington Post's report on the ICC, International Criminal Court's prosecutor seeking arrest warrants for Netanyahu and Sinwar. I knew I had put that aside somewhere, but for whatever reason in Pocket, it labeled it as Biden tells students he's working, quote, around the clock on Gaza ceasefire, which would have been an outgrowth from, is this like part of a wider news roundup? Yes. And perhaps we should go and take a look at this. But this would have been an outgrowth of the Morehouse College graduation, at which its presumably valedictorian was speaking to the students and called for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, to the applause both of the audience and, it was noted, of President Biden, which caused a little consternation among activists on the Palestine front who said, how could it be that he applauds the call for a ceasefire when he is, of course, in their minds, or many of their minds, actively seeking genocide in Gaza? Well, that might be overstating the case. And it's fairly easy to understand. Everyone, presumably, all non-crazy idiots, that is to say, all the idiots who aren't crazy, like us, you know what I mean. If you have to be a special kind of person not to want there to be a ceasefire there. Why not ceasefire wherever it happens? There's nuance to it. There's reasons to believe that a ceasefire has to be predicated on certain premises. Did I say premise already? Premised on certain premises. That's certainly true. Steve Gillers would even approve of that. But, anyway, we were reminded, even Genocide Joe wants to see a ceasefire there. Can he produce one? Does he think it's worth forcing one despite the lack of groundwork or assurances from the players involved that they will do X, Y, or Z, whatever those conditions may be? No, maybe. I don't know. But it shouldn't surprise you that people, just as people in the audience are interested in a ceasefire, so is the president. But I guess he explains himself by saying that he is, in fact, working around the clock on a Gaza ceasefire. Rachel Panett writing this for Washington Post in this news roundup here. Biden talked up his administration's push for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza in a speech to graduating seniors at Morehouse College, following nationwide protests, of course, on college campuses inflamed by the Israel-Gaza war. Just, making the observation that what's happening in Gaza and Israel is heartbreaking. He's working around the clock to help broker a deal to release Israeli hostages, such as are left alive at this point, if any, and allow much-needed humanitarian aid into Gaza, as well as plans to rebuild the Palestinian enclave after the war is over. So there's a plan. That's good news. But only the tiniest spark of good news in the middle of disastrous news. So, it's difficult and trying, but I just thought I would point that out. Once again, you got to be willing to take some semblance of good news out of things if it's offered. And I don't think it does anybody any good to walk away and say, yeah, no, he's actually pro-genocide and just throw him over. I mean, suppose they reached another ceasefire agreement. Would you simply refuse to abide by the ceasefire because it had been negotiated by Joe Biden? Hopefully that is not the case. Let's see. I guess now we can kind of turn back to the ICC thing, and I'll read the CNN report because it has a full and independently standing story as opposed to a blurb in a rotating group of news updates. The CNN reporter here is Ivana Katasova and Madalena Arujo as well. So let's read the update here. The ICC is seeking arrest warrants, you may remember, for Hamas leader in Gaza, Yahya Sinwar, and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu on charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity over the October 7th attacks on Israel and the subsequent war in Gaza. The court's prosecutor, Karim Khan, told CNN's Christian Amanpour in an exclusive interview on Monday, and that's today. So, happening not now, but earlier today. And I assume that you are up to date on the background information here. It's an interesting approach to it, and I guess maybe a little bit political, and I suppose it will be, it could theoretically be opposed by, well, certainly be opposed by everybody who's being targeted by it, yes. But I'm curious to see what the reaction is among pro-Palestinian protesters, both those who are not Palestinian themselves but pro-Palestinian regardless, and those who are Palestinian themselves to begin with, and whether they will object either to the whole thing or to the arrest warrants for Palestinian leaders, or will simply say, this is the price of it. I couldn't even hope to get inside, nor would I want to get inside the head of the Hamas leadership. But I wouldn't be terribly surprised if first of all, they think that they'll probably evade those arrest warrants, as does Netanyahu. I imagine he thinks he'll evade it too. But I guess it would be a little easier to at least know where he is than, you can't hide forever the whereabouts of the Israeli prime minister. Whereas, Hamas, non-governmental in its initial makeup, and though it supposedly governs Gaza, it's never done so the leadership has never done so from inside Gaza, I don't think. They're generally thought to be, it's thought that they know their whereabouts, and I'm certain that intelligence operations know their whereabouts. Anyway, I was wondering whether the Hamas leadership, given the nature of the organization, would say, I'm happy to, essentially martyr myself if it means that we'll also be bringing Israeli authorities to justice. They might actually accept that as a compromise, although it's also entirely possible that they may say, as they frequently do, take maximalist positions. No. You should be arresting them, not me. But we will see. Hamas leadership, Justice says, is in where? Encon. What are we talking about here? Yeah. Well, anyway, my understanding is that they've been operating out of Qatar and occasionally Egypt, but not on the ground in Gaza, which is a point of some soreness, by the way, among Palestinians and probably even some members of Hamas as well. We're here losing our lives fighting for our cause. You are safely ensconced in a condominium in Qatar. That seems a little incongruous, but it's always been the case with political leadership. Anyway, Karim Khan, the ICC prosecutor, said that the ICC is also seeking warrants, as we mentioned earlier, for Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, as well as two other top Hamas leaders who we made an attempt at pronouncing earlier. The warrants against the Israeli politicians mark the first time that the ICC has targeted the top leader of a close ally of the United States. The decision puts Netanyahu in the company of Russian President Vladimir Putin, for whom the ICC issued an arrest warrant over Moscow's war on Ukraine, and the Libyan strongman Muammar Gaddafi, now dead, of course, who was facing an arrest warrant from the ICC for alleged crimes against humanity at the time of his capture and killing in October of 2011, which is another of the things that can happen to you if you are wanted for crimes against humanity. And I don't remember there being a terrific outcry about the killing of Muammar Gaddafi. I imagine that there would be stronger statements issued if they just say outright killed Netanyahu. That would probably be a remarkable moment in history. Being head of Hamas still leaves you in that gray area as the head of a terrorist organization where Western authorities might view your killing abroad as something less than a outrage and travesty. So, there is a little bit more perhaps at stake there. Anyway, by applying for the arrest warrants against Israeli and Hamas leaders in the same action, Khan's office risks attracting criticism that it places a terror organization and an elected government on an equivalent footing. That is also an interesting aspect of this game. A panel of ICC judges will now consider Khan's application for the arrest warrants. So, not a done deal. It's an application. Worth keeping in mind. Khan said the charges against Sinwar, Haniya, and al-Masri, the Hamas figures, include extermination, murder, taking of hostages, rape, and sexual assault in detention. Yes, all such things have been alleged against the Israelis as well, but it's worth pointing out without, having to, in knee-jerk fashion, both sides of this issue. These things are alleged to have taken place on October 7th. And despite the fact that the Israeli response appears to have dwarfed the October 7th attacks by factors of 1,000, well, not 1,000, I guess the numbers are, but the numbers are certainly astounding. Well, what are we talking about? 35 to 45,000 estimated dead among the people of Gaza versus between 12 and 1,500 were estimated dead from October 7th. So you can do the math there. But while people will point to the raw numbers dwarfing the numbers of October 7th, that was a one-day total. So that was really something of a shock. And as we keep trying to point out here, that explains some of the grounding of Israeli thought, even if you can't bring yourself to see it as logical, you should at least know the illogic of it, exactly what it is. But it's not going to be, it was unlikely that it was going to be responded to with distance and dispassion, I guess you could say, at a minimum. Anyway, the world was shocked on October 7th when people were ripped from their bedrooms, from their homes, from the different kibbutzim in Israel. Khan told Amanpour, certainly true, adding that people have suffered enormously. The charges against Netanyahu and Gallant, to get around to those at last, include causing extermination, causing starvation as a method of war, including the denial of humanitarian relief supplies, deliberately targeting civilians in conflict, Khan told Amanpour. When reports surfaced last month that the ICC chief prosecutor was considering this course of action, Netanyahu said that any ICC arrest warrants against senior Israeli government and military officials would be an outrage of historic proportions. What else is he going to say about it? And that Israel has an independent legal system that rigorously investigates all violations of the law. Apparently the ICC prosecutors disagree about that, and that is part of what empowers them to do this. We'll see whether the judges agree. Asked by Amanpour about the comments made by Netanyahu, Khan said nobody is above the law. We're having that problem here in our country. at the moment. Now, he said if Israel disagrees with the ICC, they are free, notwithstanding their objections to jurisdiction, to raise a challenge before the judges of the court, and that's what I would advise them to do. Israel and the United States are not members of the ICC. You remember this? However, the ICC claims to have jurisdiction over Gaza, East Jerusalem, and the West Bank after Palestinian leaders formally agreed to be bound by the court's founding principles in 2015. So there is that. I am late on the music. We're going to exit at an awkward time, but at least the music is rolling here. The ICC announcement on Monday is separate from the case that is currently being heard by the International Court of Justice, ICJ, over, of course, the accusation from South Africa that Israel was committing genocide in its war against Hamas following the October 7th attacks. Different case. Hi everybody, it's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on News Radio. Yes. All right, I think we've entered back at a more regular place in the music, but a couple seconds later than usual. So let's see. I think we've told you what you need to know about, I think, this case, and just reminded you that it is separate from the South Africa genocide allegations. And it was a little bit confusing initially to me, thinking, as I recall, the part of the Israeli response and the questions posed to the court by other parties as well in front of the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, was, well, while it's certainly a case you can pursue against Israel, I don't know, I mean, this was sort of the Israeli objection to it. Well, why aren't you, you can't offer justice here because that would require holding Hamas responsible for its act of genocide, as they alleged, the October 7th attacks. And since Hamas is not a party to the International Court of Justice, you will refuse to exercise jurisdiction over Hamas. And so therefore, two parties that could, could reasonably be expected to answer for charges of genocide here. Of course, Israel, I guess, at the time presumed that it would be able to answer them sufficiently and escape those charges. Whether or not that ends up being true or not, we have to wait and see. But you can only charge us here, and there's no capacity to charge Hamas here. And it seems ridiculous that we would be standing here alone answering for these charges when we think Hamas should likewise be answering for them. Well, at the International Criminal Court, they can. So maybe that answers some of that question. But we'll see whether they are going to be asked to stand and answer for those. I suppose another outcome is they could charge the Hamas leaders and not the Israeli leaders on the theory that the International Court of Justice will be taking care of the Israeli leaders. But I don't know whether there's any personal jurisdiction over the Israeli leaders at ICJ in the same way that there can be at the ICC. We will see. We'll see whether this article answers any of that question or whether time answers any of those questions. As we said, this is separate from the case brought by South Africa. While the ICJ considers cases that involve countries and nations, the ICC is a criminal court which brings cases against individuals for war crimes or crimes against humanity. Monday's announcement is not the first time that the ICC acted in relation to Israel. In March of 2021, Khan's office launched an investigation into possible crimes committed in the Palestinian territories since June 2014 in Gaza and the West Bank. Located in The Hague, Netherlands, everyone kind of remembers that part about it, created by a treaty called the Rome Statute. First brought before the United Nations, the ICC operates independently. Most countries, 124 of them, are parties to the treaty, but there are notable exceptions, including Israel and the United States and Russia. That means if the court grants Khan's application and issues arrest warrants for the 5 men, any country that is a member would have to arrest them and extradite them to The Hague. Under the rules of the court, all signatories to the Rome Statute have the obligation to cooperate fully with its decisions. This would make it extremely difficult for Netanyahu and Gallant to travel internationally, including to many countries that are among Israel's closest allies, including Germany and the United Kingdom. But I guess they'd be safe in the U.S. Not that they'd be necessarily welcome. But all right. That is rather astonishing development, and we should be keeping an eye on it. Let's see. Hopefully, maybe you spent some time over the weekend reading the New York Times Magazine feature, The Unpunished, which will help you make some sense, perhaps, of the historical progression and over the decades into what the South African case in the International Court of Justice argues is not only genocide in Gaza, but argues is a system of apartheid imposed on Palestinians in both the West Bank and Gaza. And it is, in fact, a disturbing and shocking and decades-long story of descent into this kind of oppression. Palestinians, just simply no doubt about it anymore. And now there's not even among the right-wing participants in the Israeli government, not even a denial that there is such a two-tiered system. They are quite open about it being the case, and that they advocate for it, and the justice in their mind of imposing two entirely separate systems of law, one for not just Israelis, but really Jewish Israelis, that they're even beginning to be more open about their intention of denying equal rights to Arab Israeli citizens, which is, kind of like really asking for it. But anyway, you should have a look at The Unpunished in the New York Times Magazine if you prefer to do it in reading written articles. Another way of getting a good look at this, the dramatic series on HBO. And if you have the streaming service, you can go back and take a look at Our Boys, which dramatizes a great deal of the same issues based on historical events. So I recommend that you take a look at that if you prefer to see it that way. Anyway, it's rather astonishing, to say the least. All right, so other issues that I wanted to cover. It might be a good time now to go back to, I could start on another subject, but we'll leave it for another day. And I've got one in mind. But let's go back to something that we began with at the end of last week's show, the Texas Tribune's report on the Republican Texas school board member who campaigned, as most of them do, on an anti-woke agenda, and that they were going to root out all of the horrible things that they've been hearing about on Tucker Carlson and from libs of TikTok once they got in office. And the one, and so far only, Republican I've heard of who has reached elective office, investigated these wild claims, found them to be unfounded, and then has said so and said, hey, I'm not going to promote this crap anymore. In fact, I owe it to my constituents and to everyone else to let everyone know that there's no truth behind any of this stuff. And, well, let's see what happens with this person. We can restart the article and see how far we get this time. The subject of the article, Courtney Gore, a Granbury ISD, Independent School District, school board member who has disavowed the far-right platform that she campaigned on, and her defiance has brought her backlash. No surprise there. They're very aggressive in threatening people, certainly who don't, if they begin by threatening people who never agreed with their agenda. And they are, I guess, particularly scary and harsh for people that they also feel like they can accuse of betraying their agenda by telling the truth about it. Jeremy Schwartz has written this in cooperation between the Texas Tribune and ProPublica. It was from May 15th and began this way. We already read through this part. Weeks after winning a school board seat in her deeply red Texas county, Courtney Gore immersed herself in the district's curriculum, spending her nights and weekends poring over hundreds of pages of lessons plans that she had fanned out on the coffee table in her living room and even across her bed. She was searching for evidence, like actually doing the thing that she said she was going to be elected to do, searching for evidence of the sweeping national movement that she had warned on the campaign trail was indoctrinating school children. It wasn't enough for her to just raise the fears about this. She actually went to see if she could, put a stop to it. Well, I can only put a stop to it if I can find it. So let me look for it and see what we're talking about. Okay. That might be something I would do before declaring my candidacy, but whatever. We'll take what we can get. Gore, the co-host of her own far-right online talk show, had promised that she would be a strong Republican voice on the nonpartisan school board. Forget the nonpartisanship of it. Citing small-town conservative Christian values, she pledged to inspect educational materials for inappropriate messages about sexuality and race and remove them from every campus in the 7,700-student Granbury ISD, an hour southwest of Fort Worth. Over the years, our American education system has been hijacked by leftists looking to indoctrinate our kids into the progressive way of thinking. And yes, they've tried to do this in Granbury ISD, she wrote in a September 2021 Facebook post 2 months before the election. Only it turns out that no, they haven't. I cannot sit by and watch their twisted worldview infiltrate Granbury ISD, and luckily she did not have to. Because after taking office and examining hundreds of pages of curriculum, Gore was shocked by what she had found and didn't find. Shocked in what kind of way? This kind of way. This is the shocking music as well as just dramatic. The pervasive indoctrination that she had railed against simply did not exist. Children were not being sexualized. She could find no examples of critical race theory. She'd examined the curriculum related to social emotional learning, which has, of course, come under attack by Christian conservatives who say it encourages children to question gender roles and prioritizes feelings over biblical teachings. Instead, Gore found that the materials taught children how to be a good friend, a good human, which might be, valuable to Christians. Gore rushed to share the news with the hardliners who had encouraged her to run for the seat. She expected them to be relieved and excited like she had been, but they were indifferent and even dismissive because it didn't fit the narrative that they were trying to push, because that was the narrative that gave them power. I add, for your consideration. So, in the spring of 2022, Gore went public with a series of Facebook posts. She told residents that her backers were using divisive rhetoric to manipulate the community's emotions. They were interested not in improving public education, but rather in sowing distrust, Gore said. I'm over the political agenda, hypocrisy, BS. I'm not certain about how you should be reading this. It's not a proper sentence properly punctuated. I'm over the political agenda, comma, hypocrisy, lowercase no periods, BS. Gore wrote. I don't know what that means exactly. I took part in it myself. I refuse to participate in it any longer. It's not serving our party, which is not what you're supposed to be doing. We have to do better. Yes, and we have to do the work of the county independent school district, not the party. So she's not quite getting it, but I'm glad she's open to changing her mind. Gore's open defiance of the far-right GOP orthodoxy represents an unusual sign of independence in a state and in a party that expects and experts say, increasingly punish those who are deemed disloyal. It particularly stands out at a time when Republican leaders are publicly attacking elected officials who do not support direct funding to private schools. It's a hidden part of the agenda. It's not very cleverly hidden, but if you can convince everyone that public schools are woke and gross, you might be able to convince them to spend all that money on private schools instead, which should be anathema, but, people will accept stuff that doesn't make any goddamn sense if you push it hard enough. We're telling, well, what else are we going to do with all this money? Oh, I don't know. Any number of things. Build a system that does work if we think this one doesn't. Well, why reinvent the wheel when private schools work just fine? They don't. Not for these purposes. But their schools, yeah, I'll admit that much. Okay, so let's just spend the money there. No. We outvoted you. What are you going to do about it? Oh, it's one of those stupid logic situations like earlier in the show, whether it's the Israeli coalition government. We got to do the stupid, illogical thing because what else are we going to do? Or the Alito situation. It can't be a violation of judicial ethics because if it was, someone would be doing something about it. Gore's, we just read through this part. It's a rare event to see this kind of political leap, especially in a world that's so polarized, said University of Houston political scientist Brandon Rottinghouse. I wonder whether this is roting rather than rotting. We asked this question on Friday. You may remember. You rarely see these kinds of changes because the people who are vetted to run tend to be true believers. They tend not to be people who are necessarily thinking about the holistic problem. In other words, they tend not to be people who will say the opposite of what they used to say if they find out the truth is the opposite of what they thought the truth was. They're looking for people ordinarily to run for office who will say what plays into the narrative and the power game, regardless of what they find to be the truth on the ground. With the presence of Donald Trump, fealty to cause has amplified. So this kind of action is much more meaningful and much more visible than it was a decade ago, Rottinghouse said about Gore in March. Texas Governor Greg Abbott, a Republican, in case you didn't know, was victorious in unseating 5 lawmakers of his own party and forcing another 3 into a runoff election after they voted against voucher legislation that would allow the use of public dollars for students to attend private and religious schools. His efforts sent a message that those who did not unflinchingly support his priorities would face grave political repercussions. In addition to just being part of the plot to, if public schools are failing, can't we spend that money on private schools? One of the problems was, no, the law at one point made sense and said you cannot spend this money in there. Well, what if we changed the law? Well, we could try and do that, but some legislators won't go along with this. Well, what if we have them thrown out of office? Well, if you have them replaced with people who will say, I don't care what the constitutionality is or some judge ultimately says, besides which increasingly many judges are saying very, very dumb things that favor us. Maybe that will happen here. Let's pass this new dumb law that says, yes, we use public dollars for private education. Dumber things have happened. They passed a law that said you're not allowed to protest against Israel if you are seeking divestment from Israel or a boycott of Israel. Based on what did they say this? I don't know. Nothing. Does it seem constitutional to you? No. Doesn't matter. If the judges think it's unconstitutional, let them come and say so. In the meantime, arrest all these people if they say that they want to boycott or divest from Israel. It's just not based on anything. They just do it. Gore, by the way, was part of a similar movement of hardliners who had pushed out the Republican Hood County Elections Administrator in 2021 after determining that she was not conservative enough for the nonpartisan position, which is, again, not supposed to be partisan. How do you not be partisan enough for a nonpartisan position? Doesn't matter. We don't care. Now, Gore and other disillusioned local Republicans have formed a group pushing against an ultra-right faction of the party that says it has become obsessed with administering purity tests and stoking divisive politics. Oh no, there's a Western-style democracy where the ultra-right wing is out of control and is doing its best to displace any logical approaches to any problems and instead replace them with approaches that they say are, I don't know, say dictated to them by God. Where have we heard about something similar within the 2 hours of this show? The former teacher and mother of 4, that's Gore, not Netanyahu or Itamar Ben-Gvir, was influenced by such politics when she decided to run for office. She was motivated to seek a school board seat after a steady stream of reports from the right-wing media. But she has her own right-wing talk show, so, she'll get those media reports that she consumed and probably repeated. And her social media feeds pointed to what she saw as inappropriate teachings in public schools. What do you know? Could that have been maybe libs of TikTok influencing some of that? Our own Itamar Ben-Gvir, as I frequently say. Well, she too had been outraged by school mask mandates and vaccine requirements during the throes of the COVID-19 pandemic, an entry-level issue for many of the latter-day lunatics, we'll call them. But Gore said she feels that she was unwittingly part of a statewide effort to weaken local support of public schools and lay the groundwork for a voucher system. Maybe it was unwitting, but you were certainly part of that effort, yes. And she said that unless she and others sound an alarm, the alarm, in fact, residents won't realize what's happening until it's too late, right? They just think, well, look, I'm just angry about the litter box thing, damn it. That shouldn't be happening. And also Bud Light, let's say. Not that that was happening in schools, but what the hell? Neither was litter boxes. So what? Yeah, they're getting kids drunk in school on Bud Light because LGBTQ and the woke. Sure. Why not? We'll believe all of that. Do they necessarily put the 2 and 2 together and say, well, what they're trying to do is destroy confidence in public schools such that people say, fine, I know why it was once considered unconstitutional to funnel public money to private schools, but what else are we going to do? Kids need to go to school, and these schools suck, so give the money to the private schools instead. Besides which, freedom of choice for parents. You know the arguments. They may not all know that. I guess that's possibly true. Now she has figured that out, as well as, hey, all of these things that were supposedly in the curriculum are not there, so she's sounding the alarm. I feel like if I don't speak out, then I'm complicit. I've heard that said. I refuse to be complicit in something that's going to hurt children. Good, great, fine. Because of that outspokenness, Gore is facing backlash from the same people who supported her race. I can't believe it. They're reversing field? Unbelievable. So is she, of course, but anyway. She has been threatened at raucous school board meetings and shunned by people she once considered friends. School marshals escort her and fellow board members to their cars to ensure no one accosts them. I think we did get at least this far last time around. When things get particularly heated, a fellow trustee follows her in his car to make sure she gets all the way home safely. Next section, none of it was adding up. Before Gore decided to seek office for the first time, a prominent GOP operatives had been pushing for like-minded allies to take over school boards, framing the effort as necessary to maintain conservative Christian values. In May of 2021, former Trump advisor Steve Bannon, KG Bannon, told followers on his podcast that school boards were the road back to power for conservatives following the 2020 presidential election. 2 months later, North Texas-based influential pastor Rafael Cruz, you may recognize him as the father of Ted Cruz, who Trump believes assassinated Kennedy for some weird reason, but yet something RFK Jr., amplified that message on social media, saying that getting candidates on school boards was critical. We need to make sure that strong, principled Americans, those who uphold our Judeo-Christian principles, but not the Constitution, have made America the greatest country in the world, are elected to school boards, Rafael Cruz said in a July 2021 video posted to his Facebook page. Because I'll tell you, the left is controlling the school boards in America. You will tell us that. You're wrong, but you'll tell us that. Those messages reached Granbury, where former Republican State Representative Mike Lang and his political consultant Nate Criswell asked Gore to run for school board. Gore recalls hearing Cruz give a fiery speech while she was campaigning. In the speech, which reinforced her decision to run, she said Cruz boasted about flipping the school board in Southlake, Texas, by getting the churches involved in helping to install Christian candidates. Because, of course, they run the schools and then would get all the public money. They're into it. When you put in the minds of parents that there's an agenda to indoctrinate their children, and the only answer is to get conservative Christian people elected to the school board, Gore said, it's a very powerful message. Gore, now 43, first became involved in local politics in 2016 when she campaigned door-to-door for Lang, a former constable who successfully ran for the Texas legislature. She then served on a leadership committee for the Hood County GOP. No surprise there. After Lang decided not to run for re-election in 2020, he asked Gore to join the Blue Shark Show, a web-based program that he founded and co-hosted with Criswell that produced videos taking aim at local politicians and officials considered insufficiently conservative. Criswell later ran campaigns for Gore and Melanie Graft, another school board member, or candidate rather, who previously tried to remove LGBTQ-themed books from the children's section of the county library. Soon after the women won their elections, I guess they both won, the Granbury School District descended into a high-profile fight over school library books. What do you know? Administrators pulled 130 library books from the shelves after Matt Krause, a Republican representative from Fort Worth, published a list of 850 titles that he said touched on themes of sexual orientation and race. At the time, ProPublica, the Texas Tribune, and NBC News obtained audio of the district superintendent, Jeremy Glenn, making clear to librarians that he had concerns about books with LGBTQ themes, including those that did not contain descriptions of sex. So, to hell with those, right? After the reporting, the Department of Education opened a civil rights investigation, which is ongoing, into whether the district violated federal laws that prohibit discrimination based on sexual orientation and gender. A volunteer review committee of parents and district employees eventually recommended returning nearly all of those books to the shelves. Hardliners wanted additional titles removed on top of all of those, claiming that the district was allowing pornography. Who knows? Without offering, of course, any evidence to support the assertion, but Gore backed the committee's findings, saying she was satisfied with the handful of books. Oh, okay, I see where she's coming. She backed the committee's findings, not the volunteer review committee. Okay. She backed the committee's findings, saying she was satisfied with the handful of books that the district had removed for explicit content. Glenn, too, drew the ire of his one-time allies after he also supported the committee's recommendation. Lang and Criswell have since called for his ouster. They worked for his campaign, but whatever. Glenn declined an interview request through a district spokesperson. The book debate, along with a series of other fissures, contributed to Gore's growing belief that her former colleagues were more interested in misleading residents than in improving educational outcomes. In early 2022, leaders of the rapidly growing district announced plans to ask voters for $394 million in bonds to buy a new high school and renovate existing campuses. School board members established a community advisory committee that would counsel the district. Gore chose Criswell as her representative on that committee. She thought that once Criswell saw the district's needs firsthand, you thought she was honest like you. He would support the bonds, but the opposite happened. Wow, I can't believe that would happen that way. There's a sound effect for that. The opposite happened. Criswell urged voters to reject the measure, claiming some parts, such as providing full-day pre-K programs for all students, were communist in nature. More sound effects. Yeah, you got it. Gore said Criswell directed her and Graft, who did not respond to requests for comment, to post messages on social media against the bonds. When Gore pushed back, she said Criswell accused her of betraying the party from her nonpartisan position. The bonds ultimately lost, though, by a wide margin. According to Gore, Criswell also pressured her to stop speaking with all of her fellow school board members except for Graft. They're just lying to you. They're not your friends, she recalled him saying. Little culty, you know? I was like, how am I supposed to do my job as a board member if I'm not talking to anybody? Gore said. None of it was adding up. Criswell, who had previously said that he supports public schools, but in fact, I guess does not. Time for us to get out of here, by the way. Declined to answer detailed questions. Lang did not respond to requests for comment. In April of 2022, Gore rescinded her nomination of Criswell to the Bond Advisory Board. She felt that he and Lang were misleading voters about the bond and its cost to taxpayers. Mike Lang would call them snowballs, he said. You just get as many little snowballs as you can, so you're attacking from multiple fronts, and then you see which ones start to stick together and gather speed and get bigger and bigger. In June of 2022, Lang and Criswell directed one of their snowballs in Gore's direction, taking a veiled shot at the former co-host of their show. In a video, Criswell praised Graft for continuing to fight to remove books from the school district's libraries, saying she was the only one that acts as the buffer right now on that board, which is sad because, you know, we've had other people elected in recent elections that just haven't lived up to expectations. 3 days later, Gore fired back. I refuse to be someone's puppet, she wrote in a June 8th Facebook post. I refuse to be told what to do, what to say, or how to vote. I refuse to participate in any agenda that will dismantle or abolish public education. Wow. Well, that is a rare thing. We're glad to see it happening. There is still more to this article, of course. Whether we'll return to it or not, I cannot tell you for sure. Tomorrow, being Tuesday, we hope to hear from Joan McCarter. Day following that, Wednesday, Greg will be back in town. How about that?
From networksradio.com.
Well, he was in town.
You have been listening
he was busy.
to Kagro in the morning with David Waldman.
Justice Putnam is in town, not this town, but his town, and he starts off his Monday, River City Hash Monday on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Thus, Elise Stefanik was asked just one simple question, and she wouldn't answer it. I imagine that she couldn't. Never ask Elise Stefanik anything. Want to know what the question was? Stay tuned.